Now that it's getting cooler and we're starting to push our first frost of the fall, it's time to be thinking about bringing some of our more tender plants that have been out in the garden inside to give them some sort of protection so we can get them through the winter, get them to next year. One of our prime candidates are our Cannas, which they've been doing a real good job for us this summer, as they have every summer. Nice tall hedge, good color. Now, depending upon where you are in Oklahoma, in southeast Oklahoma, you can overwinter Cannas pretty regularly outside without too much problem. Here in central Oklahoma, in Stillwater, sometimes Cannas will make it through the winter, sometimes not. The year before last, it did. Last year we had a lot of problems with Cannas not overwintering. Your best bet is to go out and dig up your Cannas after the frost has hit them and killed back the foliage somewhat. Dig up entire clumps, bring them inside someplace where it's protected from freezing, but you want to keep it cool so that the plants don't grow. Just keep them cool, keep them dormant, keep them from freezing. Two other plants that you need to be digging up and bringing inside are your dahlias and gladiolus. These are, again, sometimes in some places in Oklahoma, they will overwinter, but it's best, safest to dig them up after the first frost, bring them inside. Now your dahlias, you'll want to pack in moist peat moss in some sort of box. Keep them, again, someplace cool but not freezing to keep them dormant until next spring. Gladiolus, you don't need to pack them in anything, just a net bag or old pantyhose to keep them dry. Again, you want to keep them cool. Don't keep them too warm or they may start growing. Keep them cool and dry for the gladiolus, and they should make it through without any problem until next year. Our lantanas have been another standout plant in our shrub and ornamental border here at the studio. They've been blooming prolifically for us all summer. They will tolerate the heat very well and keep on blooming. They are very sensitive to frost. You can use lantanas as an indoor houseplant, even though most of the time you think of it as an outside ornamental shrubby type plant. They will need high sunlight in order to grow and bloom well. You'll notice they're a pretty rangy shrub. You can keep them fairly compact by keeping them pinched. If you want to save them, dig one up in the fall. Try and get as much soil with the root ball as possible. That may be a little difficult. They have kind of a fibrous, stringy root system. Pot them up in a pot that's big enough for them. And this is a good time to do some pruning back to start getting it in shape. Now, as this regrows, keep those pinched back to keep a nice compact plant. And remember, if you do use it inside as a houseplant, you will need a good south window, strong light, and also need a fairly big window because it will, even with pinching back and pruning, become a rather large plant. But if you can give it light and room, it will give you color like this through the winter and also be there ready to plant out next spring in your garden. Another very cold, tender, shrubby, ornamental plant is the hibiscus. And on the other side of our garden we have rows of red hibiscus. They, like the lantana, are very sensitive to cold. The first frost is going to start killing back the foliage. You can dig those up, again getting as much of a root ball as possible. Prune them back because you are losing quite a bit of roots, not only to get them in balance with the roots, but get them into a manageable size for inside. Keep them pinched back, and again, you need high light and a lot of room, but they can be a very successful indoor houseplant. And again, saving them over until next year. Several of your bedding plants that you may not think about as perennials, like pansies, snapdragons, with a little bit of protection, you can limp them through the winter. Give them a good thick mulch of straw, and very often they will come through the winter without any problem. They will give you earlier blooms than the ones that you start from seeds or that you buy from six-packs from the greenhouses. There are also many of your annual flowering plants, like our pansies, vinca, marigolds. You can pot them up, bring them inside, again to extend their color, their life, into the winter. They will need quite a bit of light. There's a few pansies or petunias in the vinca you may not have thought about as houseplants. There are a few plants that are both houseplants commonly and outdoor bedding plants. One of these are the Impatiens. Waxleaf begonias are another, and geraniums that are very common as houseplants. Again, you can just dig these up from your garden, pot them up, bring them in, or especially on coleus, Impatiens, and waxleaf begonia that root so easily, you can just, before frost hits them, take a few cuttings, put them in plain water, root them, then pot them up. Even though the Impatiens and the begonia and the coleus like shade outside, because you have so much less light inside, you'll want at least an east or a west window, preferably a south window, so there's plenty of light for them to grow well. Now, geraniums are an old-fashioned, very common, very popular, both houseplant and outside ornamental plant. And I think I've probably heard more different ways of overwintering geraniums than any other ornamental plant that I've had to deal with. Now, the easiest way is to just grow them in pots, move them outside in the summer, and just move them back into a sunny windowsill in the fall before first frost. They will stand some frost, but get them in sometime around frost, keep them growing. A sunny windowsill, again, is important. A geranium will tolerate low light, but it won't flower. If you want a floral display from geraniums in the winter, you'll need to provide it with good, strong light. That's the simplest way. Another way is to, again, have them in pots, either dig them up and put them in pots or grow them in pots, and then just put them in a cool cellar or a garage, someplace where they won't freeze. You can either, I've heard people that just let the soil dry out. I personally keep the soil just a little bit moist. And again, this is just in the dark. You're keeping them cool, keeping them dormant, and they come through surprisingly well. You can take cuttings and root them, just like the Impatiens, and then pot them up, put them on a windowsill. Probably one of the most bizarre methods of keeping geraniums through the winter. A lady told me about it. I didn't believe her at first. She just takes bunches of cuttings, packs them together into a glass with water, and geraniums will root very well in water. Then she just leaves them in that glass on her kitchen windowsill through the winter. Now, they don't do much. They root, but there's too much competition for them to grow well. But she just keeps them there to hold. Then in the spring, she has well-rooted cuttings that she plants out in the garden. So that's a very simple way of getting geraniums through the winter. It takes a very little space, and even though you don't get a display out of them, you do get the geraniums for next spring. And next spring, at $5, $6 per potted plant, if you have a large area to plant in geraniums, that can be a considerable savings. Many of your house plants can be summered over outside, and generally they respond well to the increased sunlight and grow quite well. This crown of thorns has spent the last 2 summers outside. In both years it has put on a tremendous amount of growth, to the point now where it has outgrown its pot. It has become quite top-heavy. When you bring your houseplants back inside, check them over carefully for any sort of insects or diseases. It's best to take care of any insect problems while they're still outside, so you don't bring them inside and infest your other plants. Be especially on alert for mealybugs, whiteflies, and aphids. Now, it's also a good time as you're moving them in to do any maintenance chores like pruning, or in this case, repotting into a bigger pot. Another plant that we've talked about quite a bit, and sort of along the line of a house plant, is the Amaryllis. We've told you after you've grown it and had it bloom, you can save it by keeping it in a sunny window through the winter, bring it outside during the summer and let it grow. Now, this particular Amaryllis I've had since 1983, so it's been through quite a few seasons for us and bloomed every year. As it gets bigger each year, it'll often send off side shoots. Now, after you get ready to bring your Amaryllis in the fall, it's time to be kind of nasty to them. We've gone over this before, but to get Amaryllis to bloom, you need to have them go through a dry, dormant period. Otherwise, they won't bloom. If you don't do that, they'll just keep growing green and never do anything for you. When you bring them in, put them in a dry, cool closet or in the garage. Don't water them, and within a few weeks, they'll look like this. And this is what you want. You want those leaves to dry back naturally and the bulb to dry up, and keep it dried for 8 weeks at least. This is the length of dormant period that it needs to get the flower buds formed, to get a good display. Now, be careful, don't prune the green leaves off when you dry it out. Leave them on, let them dry down naturally. There's a lot of nutrients and carbohydrates in those leaves. As they dry down naturally, those will be drawn down and stored in the bulb. If you cut the leaves off, then they're lost to the plant. After it's been dried down, if you want to repot your plant or divide off some of the side shoots, that's the time to do it while it's still dormant, before you've started them to regrow. And once you start seeing some growth coming, or after you've gone 8 weeks, you can bring them inside, put them in a sunny windowsill, and let them start growing and go back into your blossom cycle. Now, this is a rosemary cutting that I took back in midsummer. That's the reason it looks so small. Rosemary will get to be a rather large shrubby type herb. Now, rosemary is not fully hardy in Oklahoma. So if you leave it outside, chances are it will winter kill. But by growing it in a container, you can bring it inside, just keep it in a cool spot in the garage or in a cellar. Just keep it cool, keep it dormant. You can get it through the winter very easily. This way, this little plant next spring will start growing. We'll have a large shrub of rosemary, and we'll be all set to go next spring. And we can keep that rosemary from year to year, whereas if we left it outside, we'd have to replant every year. Now this is one of my pet plants. This is it's a species of Fuchsia, very, very nice blossoms. It is cold tender. It will winter kill if left outside. This has been with me for 5 years though. 2 of those years it has wintered over on an office windowsill, but 3 of them it's just been put in a cellar or a garage, kept cool. Even in the dark, it will come through very well. Next spring, as it starts getting warmed up, you can bring it back out and let it start growing. Now, on something that is frost tender, I keep this near the garage door as frosts start coming. Bring it in the evening when there's a frost predicted, pull it back out in the morning. Then once the frosts start coming too frequently, that's when I start pulling it back inside and let it overwinter.